You're listening to Lead Through Strengths, where you'll learn to apply your greatest strengths at work. I'm your host, Lisa Cummings, also joined by your other host this week, Joseph Dvorak.
Hello.
Here to talk to you about activities, StrengthsFinder activities, and conversations that help you go deeper as a team over time. Now, of course, in your ideal world, you hire Joseph to come in. He's your facilitator that you request. It's easy because he has a bag of great tricks because he's been doing CliftonStrengths for 20 years. But sometimes people come to us and say, oh gosh, I don't have the budget right now, but I can buy everyone a StrengthsFinder 2.0 book. So Joseph, if we were going to share some of our favorite kind of things that might give someone a path to have good conversations, what are some of your favorites?
Yeah, so I have to give credit to Chip Anderson, who was one of the founders of the StrengthsFinder movement with Don Clifton back in the day. I saw him do this in 2001. I had just started going through my own strengths, and I was at a retreat with a bunch of USC and UCLA students that we were with, and I was kind of guesting into their group. And Chip Anderson had everyone take out glasses, and he did this whole thing about, strengths are the lenses that you see the world through, and we all have unique glasses. And so then he had people divide up, into the 4 quadrants. So people who have striving themes go over here, and people who have influencing themes go over here, and people who have, relating themes and so on. And then he would have a little bit like what you and I talked about before with like a strengths mixer, where he would say like, what's a strength that you really like of your top 5, and talk about it. And the other person has to actively listen for a minute. So the other person can't interrupt. They actually have to actively listen, which is his own skill in this day and age. And they would talk back and forth. And he would do that for 2 hours. And he would just, all right, switch partners. Okay, what's a strength that gets in your way sometimes and why? What's a strength that fits you best and why? What strength combinations do you see working together? And he would just keep rotating. And I took that one. And when I became a strengths facilitator about a year later, I've used some version of that for, as you mentioned, like 20 years now. And that's a great way where it's one-on-one, because some people do well in the group setting. Some people do well one-on-one. Some people will do well just reading the StrengthsFinder book on their own and doing it. But that strengths mixer, that's what came to mind when you asked that question.
I love that. One idea that I had recently for breakout rooms that I haven't tried to execute yet, and I tend to do this more in Zoom than Teams, although we do a lot of Teams meetings as well, is in Zoom, courtesy of Charlotte Blair. Thank you, Charlotte. She had this idea of renaming yourself in Zoom with your talent themes. So it would say, for example, I rename myself Lisa, strategic, maximizer, positivity, individualization, woo. As much as you can fit it in there, you might have to truncate a little bit. And that works great because as you're in chat, you can have activities and you start to see people's answers and you can look back, and because that's the name label, you can see how that strength showed up and colored their answer. But for breakout room purposes, what I've been thinking about doing is if you want someone in that mixer idea to be able to go in the same breakout room, then you pick a strength where you like to be matched up with somebody. You'd have to have a pretty large room. I would imagine it'd be a 200-person kind of event for this to work. But let's say you want to find all the other people who lead through learner. So you rename yourself Lisa Learner, or I think you'd have to put learner first. So that'd be alphabetized. Learner, Lisa. And then the person who's facilitating could use those to make the breakout rooms, because then you could quickly grab anyone who is listed by learner first and it would be in order. So I think it could be done. And if you had the team's reports in advance and you wanted to pre-place people in breakout rooms, you can do that in technology, pre-set up your breakout rooms.
Yeah. And what you just made me think of is a takeoff on what you talked about, where you have the common strengths. Then there's also the activity that I've done over the years where, you have a certain amount of time and you have to find people who have strengths that you don't have. And you have to kind of ask them, what is that strength? How do you use it? What good is it, for you? Maybe it's a strength that you're like, well, how is that even a strength or whatever? But you could do the same in breakouts, and you could just be in with 5 or 6 people and say, okay, I have these strengths. You have these strengths. I don't have connectedness. Let's talk about that one. And how is that strength strong for you? So that's an old Gallup activity from way back, probably when I first started. And I think you could do that in the virtual setting as well.
Yeah, I think you could too. There's one that I used to use in an in-person. Let's see, I'll walk away from the mic for a second. Sometimes in in-person sessions, I would use this. It's like the spin the wheel sort of thing, where I would have the team brainstorm some challenges or questions that they're going through. And then you list the challenges as all the options, and then you can spin the wheel. And then you have to get into groups and really quickly say, all right, which one could you lean on to solve for that issue? And how would it help you get through the challenge? And so to translate it in a virtual environment, there are actually spin the wheel apps. So
cool.
you can share your iPad on screen or whatever device and have the spin the wheel going and replicate it in a virtual. Let's use this to kind of take the arc toward something that you said to me in the past, which was that you've been really thinking a lot about how to introduce this stuff to your team in bite-sized pieces. Because when you were just talking, I was like, yeah, I think that we're like stuck in an old world thinking of what are the training activities when we have 4 hours to spend together in person in a room. And if that's not our reality, and we need to get down with the new plan, which is, hey, bite size, what can we do when we have 5 minutes to do strengths together and it's remote? So what are some of the conversations you're having in that bite size?
Yeah, and that takes me way back to when I was working with some different collegiate teams. And I remember I had a great partner client, the University of Maryland, and so I had the pleasure of working with a couple of groups there, and they would always ask that question because they weren't bringing me in more than once a year, which was great. But then how could they keep the conversation going? And I would often give them, 50 strengths-based questions, and they would typically at team meetings sometimes just ask one question and have everyone give like a 30-second answer. So it might be 10 minutes, but they didn't need to be the expert StrengthsFinder facilitator just to ask the strengths-based question. And so that was one. And one of those questions, Lisa, a lot of times would be like, where have you seen a teammate's strength at work in the last week or two? Give an example of that. Oh, I saw your empathy here and, you did this there. And so those can be really short and sweet and keep people engaged. But I used to think about that for how clients could keep the conversation alive post the engagement of strengths.
Yeah, that's a big one. It's reminded me of something that it popped in my head facilitating last week on Microsoft Teams, where I said, post a GIF that demonstrates how your strengths are serving you this week. And, of course, they're funny and there's all sorts of, they have to think for a minute and figure out, what am I actually trying to convey here? And then you go find the thing for it. And it doesn't matter whether you call it a GIF or a GIF. That is fun. And it gets the team energized and it takes about 2 minutes. And if somebody posts some random thing like a guy sliding on a banana and you're like, hey, Sally, tell us more about that one. Right. And then when she explains it, that becomes the piece that you expand. So you get a bunch of funny ones, but then you also got that one little deep snippet that opened it up for the person.
Yeah. And that stuff is happening in messages, right, between people anyway. So bringing that out into the meeting is fantastic. And I think the image piece on that is so powerful too, because for those who are visual learners, it can click in a different way than listening to you or I talk about the strength, or even the teammates talking about it, to be like, oh, I see that, I get that. And that's something we try to do over the years, is get into the image, what image would you think of with your strengths and whatnot. And then you combine that with narrative and you combine that with experience. That's where you start getting more powerful and it gets deeper and it sinks in, and where the fun really starts.
Oh, I think you just brought up something else just by virtue of talking about what we used to do. So if you think about the old bring an image, select the picture that best represents your strengths, or whatever it is as you're getting started, if you actually said, everybody on the team is going to be on a camera and go around your house for just a minute and find something that represents your themes to you. And then people come back with props where you have the real life object where I'm holding a pig that's flying and I'm talking about how that seems like my maximizer because somebody else may have thought when pigs fly, we'll do that. But I can see the quality steps from here to there that help us get, and the description of it makes it all come to light.
Well, what's interesting, just reminded me of, I have a friend who leads a faith community in north of San Francisco, and he was talking about, they've been doing all virtual church for, COVID times. And a lot of people have, there's been a lot of debate about we want to get back in person and all of, there's been, there's different, that's a whole other conversation. But he was saying that they've actually connected more with their congregants more than ever, because people are actually doing that where they're walking around their house and they're in their house where they used to be in church together, and now they do time of sharing, and they can see like what's going on in the person's house and whatnot. So it's interesting. Like it's not even a fully formed thought, but what you were just saying is really important. And then people are opening their houses up to connection, and that's a whole different level. So I'm still thinking about that one, but that's really powerful to have people walk around and kind of share that imagery piece.
Well, the lesson I'm taking away from what you just said is many of us who facilitated in person for years, our first thought is, okay, I had all of these great exercises that I did in person. Can I retrofit that into a virtual environment? And it may or may not work to translate old activities into a new environment, but instead, why not take the thing that seems like a disadvantage and turn it into something you only get when you're remote and you only get when people are in their own comfortable environment, or the things that maybe in the past we joked around about seeing moving boxes in the back because it's your real life. You just moved. Right. So now we have a conversation piece. Oh, where did you move? Are you still in Denver? Did you get closer to the mountains? I have 100 questions I could ask you prompted by the U-Haul box that I never would have seen if we were in the office. So I think going native for the platform and letting it create a new set of activities, conversations, the way that we're thinking, and even the cadence, like getting down to the small bits instead of don't torture people with the half a day, full day on virtual, trying to do one CliftonStrengths workshop for 6 hours virtual. Don't do it.
And yeah, it's so interesting. And the thing that you made me think of was, I remember a number of years ago, and I think this game still exists, the online game World of Warcraft. So you're a character, and to get things done, you typically had to work with other people as a character in this game. And at some point I read an article in like Harvard Business Review or something that was like, if you can do well in World of Warcraft, you can lead, the teams of the future because you're able to get people. And it was like people who you have no rank on, it might be a 12-year-old and a 40-year-old playing at the same time, and you don't know who people are, and you have to get these people online to like work together. And I think like, wow, I hadn't thought about that till right now, but how prescient that was of where we are now, because now we're fully into that, right? Where it's like we're fully virtual, and that in some ways those massively online games were like 10 years ahead of what we would hit with COVID. And it's even more true now, like how do you lead with people and how do you work with people and how do you get them, especially in flat organizational structure where, you need to be collaborative. And certainly the generations coming behind you and our collaboration is just a given, right? It's different. It's not as hierarchical. It's not, and I don't like to be too generation this is that and other, but in general, they do prefer to be collaborative. So lots of good stuff here, lots of stuff that ties in with strengths. Strengths help. So use strengths in that.
Yeah. And I think even using the game example and relating it to workplaces that are complex, they're matrixed, they're global, you're on all different time zones, working with all different people in the organization at different levels and different departments and business units with different priorities. And if you can figure that out, and oh, by the way, CliftonStrengths, it gives you a lot of tools to figure out how to navigate that world, then you're on the right path to figuring out how to navigate work in the years ahead.
Who knew that online games would give us a glimpse of the future? But
yes. So if you're listening to this and you need a CliftonStrengths facilitator or a World of Warcraft, I just got it all wrong. What is it?
It's World of Warcraft.
World of Warcraft. Okay, that's what I was about to say. But as the tongue twister was coming out, I was thinking, I'm getting this wrong. Then, Joseph's your consultant. He's ready for you. So be sure to go over to the leadthroughstrengths.com/contact us form and make the formal request that he be your facilitator, and he can bring some of these cool strengths conversations and activities to your team in bite-sized chunks, of course. With that, we'll leave you for now, and this has been Lead Through Strengths. Good luck to you as you claim your talents and share them with the world. Bye for now.